This week on the Virtual Skeptics, Bob is screaming about gay frogs. Eve cures meningitis with a spicy meatball. Barb is undefined. And Tim is ranting about Wikipedia again. I'm your host, Tim Farley.
Tim, Wikipedia Farley.
Wikipedia Brown. I shouldn't say that. There's someone who's that's their handle on Twitter. And it's a good handle.
It is.
Hi, this is Virtual Skeptics, and we're here live. And Brian is traveling, so he could not host the show tonight. He's in Boston, you think?
Mm-hmm.
From his Instagram feed?
Seemed to be today, yeah.
So here we are, and we're live on Wednesday night. You can comment on Twitter, but let me introduce the cast if you haven't figured it out already. First up, we have Bob Blaskowitz, CSI's conspiracy guy, web columnist, blogger for Skeptical Humanities, and Skepticality contributor. Eve Siebert, editor and blogger at Skeptical Humanities, contributor to Skepticality and Insight at skeptic.com. Barbara Drescher, former psychology instructor, blogger at ICBS Everywhere, and contributor to skeptical projects such as Insight at skeptic.com and The Odds Must Be Crazy. And I'm Tim Farley. I created What's the Harm? I'm a former JREF fellow, and I've done a bunch of skeptic stuff, although not a ton of stuff lately other than Twitter. So here we are. You can comment using the Virtual Skeptics tag on Twitter or I think the chat is active. I guess I should go double check, but I believe the chat is active on YouTube off to the right. So, and our first topic tonight is Bob.
Well,
We're
I
gonna
am
talk
very
about Bob?
interesting.
Yeah,
All right, so
almost
this week,
special.
yeah,
Yes, that's the word I would use. Yeah.
very, very special indeed. Thanks, guys. So, Kelly Jones, who runs the site custodywars.com, is the ex-wife of Alex Jones. And last year, you may remember that there were some issues involving a custody battle following their... Well, they were divorced in 2005, so it seems like pretty far along. Pretty late in the game for them to still be doing this custody thing, but whatever. She has been on a rampage lately. She's been very stridently protesting, I think, the final terms of the custody agreement. She says that there are, she blames the child custody system of being corrupt, and that there might be bribery involved. She says that Alex Jones, when her story comes out, will be indicted. You know, all of these things have been popping up and bubbling onto her Twitter feed, and she got an astronaut to vouch for her, which I thought was weird.
Which one?
That's true, right? But what's Ed
Mitchell?
Mitchell? Yeah, that's right. No,
There's actually 2 or 3 kind of woo-woo astronauts out there.
Yeah, I was going to say. It's...
At least one of them's died, though, already.
Yeah, the one who walked on the moon. Yeah, it's very strange. So this week she gave an interview that was reposted on Media Matters, and I can't remember the name of the guy because he was utterly inconsequential. The guy who was interviewing her. He was
Bill Inconsequential?
Huh?
Bill Inconsequential?
Bill Inconsequential from inconsequentialwars.com. But no, he did say, no, he just asked real softball questions and didn't really challenge her much at all. Because she was making claims and she wasn't providing evidence.
Huh.
It sounds like it would have been a good match, honestly. But yeah, so she said that there were injunctions against her for using certain words to describe Jones, and that this injunction was unconstitutional. Yeah, I don't know. Like, she just doesn't give enough detail for us to really care.
So are you saying that someone who intentionally married Alex Jones is not entirely credible?
Well, she's saying is that it's like his orbit is like being in a cult, and that she was victimized. She says that there were what is the word that she used? A domestic violence situation is how she described her life, which would in this era, it's important that you take that seriously. But she couldn't convince a judge. She convinced the jury, it sounds like, but not the judge. And she blames that on, quote, corrupt monsters who will lie to take kids away from good parents.
So she's saying the government is plotting on Alex Jones's side? Because
Dear God. Yeah, that's exactly what she's kind of saying. She hints that there's a bribery, but she doesn't offer any evidence. Alex Jones, in addition to last year's custody battle, has faced complaints recently, and I kind of like seeing that, him harried by the hordes of hell, and also innocent people who happen to be swept up. In some ways, people who work for Jones, you kind of feel for them in much the same way you feel for someone who works for Sinclair. You signed that contract.
Well, I feel a little sorrier for people who work for Sinclair because
they were bought up.
Started working at perfectly nice little local news station, and then it was taken over by Satan.
Right. Well, when they asked them to sign their contracts in their own blood, that should have been a tip-off.
Yeah.
But yeah. So he has been
always sign in someone else's blood.
Huh?
Always insist on signing in someone else's blood.
That's right. You're dark.
Good advice.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to get you out of the non-disclosure, though.
I don't understand how these horrible non-disclosure things are allowed to stand. I mean, I know that they're ubiquitous, but they just...
If you want the job, they'll make you sign it. We still have non-disclosures.
But I don't know how that could be
non-compete. Legal. It's actually not the non-disclosures aren't the issues. The non-competes.
The non-competes are there for a reason, right?
Yeah.
That you can't move
can't
yourself.
Steal intellectual property. Basically, if you are what you learn on, it's supposed to. Those things are supposed to cover things that you learn to do on the job. Taking that. They consider that in a sense. So
let's say
intellectual property.
You develop a beat in St. Louis while you have your job at the local station there. You can't move to another St. Louis station and use those sources in that network. And usually there's a time limit or something, but that's usually what it's for. But they also have some pretty.
But 6 months is a long time to be without a job if you don't want to move.
Oh, totally. Yeah,
and that's what those non-competes are, and yeah, so it's a double-edged sword.
So Jones has faced complaints from two former employees, a guy by the name of Rob Jackson, who is alleging that he experienced anti-Semitic discrimination while he worked there, being referred to as something as like the Jewish employee. Chronically, that was his name, the Jewish employee. And that blows my mind that at a conspiracy theory-based enterprise that some people might be anti-Semitic, especially when they're ranting against the globalists all the time.
Well, is there a possibility that George Soros or the Rothschilds put this Jewish employee up to this?
Oh, it's almost certain.
Yeah, okay.
Obviously.
Thought so.
Yeah.
When they're not busy controlling the weather, obviously.
Right, of course.
True. And so the other former employee who worked, I think, was some sort of media producer for the Truth like Incorporated or whatever the name of the group that owns Jones's.
Truth Co.
Something like that. It really is. Ashley Beckford is suing for sexual harassment for groping in unwanted advances. Jones faced.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. Jones faces a defamation lawsuit from someone named Brennan Gilmore, who had the misfortune to be in Charlottesville and filming the car that crashed into the crowd. And the claim is that because he happened to film it, that he knew it was going to happen and was therefore part of it. Jones said that Gilmore was paid $320,000 to stage the attack and lie about it in the press. So Gilmore is suing for defamation and intentional infliction of emotional distress. And more power to him. I wish, I mean, defending yourself against this stuff is expensive. And it's not a sure thing. Not everybody can do it. And conspiracy theorists, when they latch onto something, they destroy lives. Another person suing Jones for defamation is after. So, okay, this is what happened. The guy's name is Marcel Fontaine, and Jones published a photo of him, which Jones identified as the suspected real shooter at the Parkland High School. How did Alex Jones know that Fontaine was the shooter? Well, the guy had a joke T-shirt on with an image of Mao, Fidel, and Carl with party hats and drinking from red plastic cups with the phrase "Communist Party" underneath it.
Well, didn't it say on the website something like "shooter is a lefty commie"?
Yeah, and that was the so he's had a mat on for the communists for a long time.
Well, yeah, they also have to. He's trying to distract from the fact that the shooter was a right-wing nut.
Well, I think at that point no one knew.
Yeah.
Actually,
he just found a picture of a guy on the internet
pretty early.
But so yeah, he's a. It looks like the Jones is he's taking a lot of flack. I mean, I can see Jones and his wife basically bludgeoning themselves in Tacomas, and I'd kind of be fine with it. What I do see, however, is recently increasing mention of Jones's son Rex. One of the things that he challenged David Hogg to the kid from Parkland to debate his son Rex. I know. It's a stunt.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sure he's just running right out to be on InfoWars.
Right.
My son's smarter than you.
Oh,
It's
God.
just God.
That seems incredibly unlikely.
Yeah.
So the other thing in conspiracy theory land is that Mike Adams started a website called Hogwatch.
Oh.
Yeah, I saw that.
Because he is a worthless...
Is it because he really likes Terry Pratchett?
I don't think so.
No.
I don't think so.
Mike Adams is a similarly minded... Yeah, he was on InfoWars this week, too. There was some crap coming out of his mouth, probably.
Was he wearing a lab coat? Because he has a lab coat. So
well, he has a lab coat.
He must be reliable.
I'll give him that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's what's going on right now. Those kids have shown remarkable resilience. Given the number of people who are going after them. Frank
Stallone, for instance.
Frank Stallone, who who apologized in the most sniveling way possible.
Yeah.
I would never suggest that someone should hit these kids. And everyone's like, yeah, well,
done so.
That's what you did in your tweet, man. You know, Laura Ingraham is now on vacation.
Yeah,
permanent vacation.
Well, we don't know, but Bill O'Reilly once went on vacation and never came back.
Yeah.
Yeah, but she probably hasn't sexually harassed quite as many people.
No,
Well-
true, but if her advertisers don't come back, she won't be coming back. That's really the issue.
And the other thing, I would like to see this mobilized against Fox itself.
Yeah, that ain't gonna happen.
It is, first of all, the company is basically a fraternity house, but with more rape. This is not anything extraordinary. The racism, the white supremacy, all of that stuff is on the surface, and it's like people advertising in the freaking Daily Mail. I don't know how that happens, other than like having no standards whatsoever.
Yeah.
But yeah. So that's
the Daily Mail online has, I believe, like huge reach though.
Yeah, it does.
There's a lot of tabloid.
Yeah.
Well, it is a tabloid, go figure. But you know, a lot of the celebrity stuff and the photos and that sort of thing.
Yeah, a lot of people just read it for fluffy stuff like that, and they're not in it for facts. So the fact that there are no facts doesn't bother them. They're in it for pictures. I was trying to equivalent of Kim Kardashian, but I wouldn't come up with the right name.
Yeah.
Whoever.
When people are looking for info about people about celebrities, they don't discriminate.
Yeah.
So that's the way it is.
Yeah. All right. Let's see. Do we have any questions? Not seeing a lot.
And they're turning the frogs gay.
Something about Bieber.
All right. Well, I think our next topic is from Barb.
Okay. Well, what I'm going to bring up today is probably going to be a little more of a discussion. This popped into my head because someone on Facebook posted a link to an article that counted the number of mass shootings in a given time period. It was from February, but it was very interesting because there were almost as many mass shootings as there were days in that time period. And then Ben Radford asked the question in comments, why 4? Because the article defined mass shootings as an incident in which 4 or more people, not including the shooter, were injured or killed. And he asked why 4 as opposed to 2 or 3. I vaguely remember reading about why 4 years and years ago, when the mass killing definition sort of began. And I thought there was some reason that was based on the mathematics of it, like in a given context, this is, sort of the minimum of what happens. But so I went looking for that. And I sort of was looking for an accepted definition. And I found that there really was none. I always thought it was 4 people killed. And that is somebody's definition, but people really disagree. What they disagree on isn't even the number 4, which I thought was really interesting. What people disagree on is whether the victims must have been killed rather than just injured, and the relationship between the victims and the shooter. So the Wikipedia page on this, it seems to have some mistakes in it, but I'm not sure if they're mistakes because there's so many different people said different things. And I think that part of that is because when I was reading, these about a dozen articles that I read about it, they were all written at different times. And this has actually changed. But the Wikipedia article said that the Congressional Research Service acknowledges that there is not a broadly accepted definition and defines public mass shooting as one in which 4 or more people selected indiscriminately, not including the perpetrator, are killed, echoing the FBI definition of the term mass murder. Now, some sources said that the FBI definition of the term mass murder is actually 3 or more. Some said it was 4 or more. The FBI doesn't seem to have a definition of mass shooting, although the Wikipedia article said it did. So maybe it actually does, and it didn't in some of the articles that I read that said that it didn't.
Boy.
Yeah, so I think this is
see
something that's
opportunities for ambiguity here.
yeah, I think this is something that's been changing over time as we have to deal with it more and more. But what's interesting about it is that people criticize the crap out of people for using statistics that are based on a definition they disagree with. And I think that's a problem, because if there is not an accepted definition, then people can use whatever definition they want to use.
Oh, you almost went there.
And well, there are many definitions. They just they include or exclude certain things, and I find all of them very problematic. I find the inclusion and exclusion of some things very problematic. And this is a problem because when we're talking about these numbers, the numbers are vastly different when you include and exclude certain things. There are some things that change the number only a little bit, like whether or not you include the shooter in the victims. But almost nobody does. So there are really very few people that count the shooter themselves as one of the victims. Changing the number from 3 to 4 doesn't seem to vastly change the number of shootings either. But whether or not it is, but who the victims are and whether or not and where it took place does. So here's some of the problems with it. And I think it's interesting because we all seem to know what we mean when we say mass shooting, but any definition that we try to use has problems with it. So the most strict definition is the one that I read to you, which is 4 or more people, 4 or more victims, not including the shooter, who are killed, and that it occurs in a public place. But even that has problems because some that would exclude some cases that we would clearly define as mass shooting, like the case where the guy went to shoot his ex-wife and he went to like a Super Bowl party or something like that, or football party, and shot 7 people, including his wife, and killed them. And that was sort of a public place because it was a party, right? But it was a private home, so it's a tough one.
Right. But what about something like
here's the issue. Here's the other issue. The selected indiscriminately is a problem. What were you going to say, Bob?
That totally excludes what happened at YouTube, which is clearly a mass shooting.
Yes. Well, no. The thing that excludes YouTube is that the people we don't know if the people were selected indiscriminately, although they do seem to be.
They were, yeah.
But nobody died.
Yeah.
So that would exclude it. So,
yeah.
Personally, I think you have to include injuries. You just have to. But
one of the injuries was a sprained ankle. I think there are only 3.
I think you have to include people who are shot. I think you have to include people who are shot. So if we use 4 killed, then we ignore the injuries. And that difference could be just a matter of luck. There was one article that I said that I read that noted that, the difference between surviving and dying could be just some centimeter, and the intent is the same, right? So also people want to include the motivation of the shooter. That's problematic in and of itself because you don't always know what the motivation is.
Sometimes you never know.
Sometimes you never know. Like the Vegas shooter, we never really know. So I think we should include injuries. I think that 4 is a fine number, although the YouTube shooter is a problem that wouldn't end up in the numbers. Regardless of whether we use the injuries or deaths, defining it by the number of people means including people who killed family members and gang violence. Right. And this is a major complaint of a lot of people that the people are using numbers that include domestic violence and gang violence, where the motivation is not, it's not to kill random people. But if we restrict mass shooting to those which the shooter targets strangers, then we exclude workplace shootings, and we exclude things like the shooting that I just talked about. We exclude the salon shooting in Seal Beach. In that case, 9 people were shot. Only 1 person survived. Most were strangers to the shooter, but he was clearly there to kill his ex-wife. But he killed somebody in the parking lot that he didn't know. So I don't think that you can consider whether the shooter targeted the strangers. And in any case, why wouldn't we include these cases in the term mass shooting? Mass shooting means you shot a number of people. That's what the term means. The motive is to kill people, whether it's revenge, money, or terrorism. The term mass shooting doesn't refer to motive. It refers to volume. It refers to the number of victims, and it refers to the method, shooting. We have other terms to describe things like motive, like terrorism or gang violence. When we used to discuss, when people use mass shootings to discuss the need for gun control, I don't see why any gun violence should be excluded at all, because they're trying to make the point of it's about guns. The reason people use the term mass shootings is to differentiate it from other gun violence. And the reason they do that is a means of persuading people who don't think that it could happen to them when it clearly can. So we talk about mass shootings instead of just shootings in general, because people think of gang violence or domestic violence shootings as happening to other people. People who don't take care of themselves, people that put themselves in bad situations or live in bad neighborhoods. When we talk about mass shootings, that could happen to anybody. It's random, and that's why people are so afraid of it.
Yeah,
yes,
shit.
At a country music concert. So that is what makes people afraid of guns, and so that's why they use the term mass shootings. But that term itself, I mean, it's written in the words what it should mean. So I like the definition used by the Gun Violence Archive, which is the definition that was used in the post that started all of this, looking for a reason. It's 4 people or more, excluding the shooter, who are injured or killed. And that includes, it doesn't insist that it be in a public place, and it doesn't insist.
I mean, in a way though, that would exclude a potentially, given. Oh, I guess, did you mention earlier that changing it from 3 to 4 doesn't change the number?
It doesn't change the number as much as things like excluding gang violence, knowing the victim.
Yeah, I would say. I mean, like if you shoot at more than 2 people, that strikes me as a mass shooting event. Like that's. Well,
what if you don't hit anybody?
Well,
what about?
And it isn't a shooting because nobody was shot.
But they weren't shoot. Well, no, something was shot.
I have a question.
Somebody was shooting.
I have a question.
Yeah.
You've mentioned gang violence a couple times. Are you assuming in your definition that we're talking about one shooter in all cases, or
no? Nobody actually does that. Nobody actually restricts it to one shooter. They restrict it to one incident, and they restrict it to a period of time. So it has to be a single geographic location. So like the Newtown shooting would be all one incident, even though the mother was killed in a different location because it was nearby, and because of the time frame, it was all within a short period of time. So there's nothing of what they call a cooling off period, which you would see in, say, a serial killer. A serial killer usually has a cooling off period. They don't just go on a rampage and kill a bunch of people in a short period of time. That's not a serial killing. That's a mass killing. A serial killing would be you kill someone, or even a couple of people. There's a cooling off period, and then you go kill some more.
I kind of thought you were going to go in a different direction with the reason why mass shooting is used, and the way people pile up qualifiers is to exclude a whole bunch of things from mass shooting numbers.
Yes, that is something that if you're trying to, protect gun laws, if you're trying to prevent reasonable gun control laws, then you're going to claim that there are very few mass shootings. But you're probably not going to bring up the word mass shootings at all, unless it's to criticize somebody who is, because you don't want to remind people that they could be shot. Yeah. That anybody could be shot. Here's a little fun fact I came across while I was looking for it. In one study, it has been estimated that 31% of public mass shootings occur in the U.S., although it only has 5% of the world's population. I thought that was
us.
Yeah,
USA.
Yeah.
Jesus.
Yeah. So I don't know. I like the definition of including people who were injured. I don't think there's anything wrong with the number 4 as long as it excludes the shooter. And I don't think motive should matter because we mostly, I mean, that term, we have other terms to qualify it.
Hold on. I just thought of a counterexample, and I want to make sure that I got it right before we move on. I'm checking.
All right, well, stop the show, everyone.
No, Eve, say some crap. You're good at that. Okay.
Well,
I was just thinking, while you're looking for that, I was just thinking, just the fact that we can have a 20-minute discussion on the various dimensions of these incidents tells us that there's too many of them. There's way too many of them.
Yeah,
no matter what your definition is.
There are way too many of them. Although the numbers get dramatically smaller as you talk about only public mass shootings. That if you use that definition that the Congressional Research Office uses. Yeah.
Domestic mass shootings, they're fine. We don't need to worry about those.
Well, to be fair, they're not saying we don't need to worry about them. They just don't include them in the term mass shooting. And I don't understand that, because why not just come up with another term? Public mass shooting should include all public mass shootings. You can exclude the private, the ones that occur in private, and that'll cut the numbers dramatically. You don't then have to exclude those in which the shooter knew somebody. Yeah, or didn't know in which they knew somebody or which they targeted somebody. So that would be public mass shootings in which the shooter shot indiscriminately. You know, it just, I think it gets a bit ridiculous. We need to be able to count these things. And when we're talking about gun violence, it's just like when we're talking about school shootings. We're not advocating gun control so that we can protect our kids in school. We're advocating gun control so we can protect our kids in school and people attending concerts and people going to the mall and people going to the movies. You know, adding armed guards and arming teachers is not going to protect those kids when they go to the movies. It just isn't. And we can't all walk around, you know, with armed guards.
Wasn't there a case where there was somebody who was waving around like a pistol or something in a public area? I thought it was in New York. The cop shot, a bunch of people were wounded, including possibly the person waving the gun.
Oh, yeah. I remember that incident.
That complicates the idea of mass shooting there.
That sounds like a movie, though. It sounds like Breathless. You know?
No, I know what you're talking about, Bob. It was in like Midtown Manhattan and or somewhere in Manhattan, and
some guy in the street and a bunch of people.
There was some going on, but basically a lot of friendly fire. The police ended up shooting at the guy and hitting a lot of bystanders.
Yeah. But that
There's also a problem with the good guy with a gun, because it turns out
the good guy with the gun is
have the best aim.
Yeah, my favorite spin on that, the phrase that the only thing that stops a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun, sounds like someone who's trying to sell 2 guns.
Double your sales.
That's a good point. Yeah, that's a really good point. So you couldn't find you Googled and couldn't find it?
You know what? Everything, the news feeds are overwhelmed by the YouTube shooting. So when I say multiple injuries, it doesn't even come up. So, or New York, it'll go to the New York Post or something.
Did you try waving gun?
No, that'll get me shot. See what I did there?
Yeah,
I made a funny.
It was very funny.
White people with guns and not killed by cops. Okay. Okay, is this suspect threatens deputies, waves gun before being shot, and... No, that was Butte County.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. Maybe we'll find it before the show's over. I don't see any questions.
I'm glad I'm not the only one who heard it, though. So.
I guess we'll go on to Eve. Right?
Okay. In 2012, Ezekiel Steffen, the unvaccinated 19-month-old son of David and Colette Steffen, became ill. Naturally, the parents took reasonable steps to treat their son's illness. They consulted a naturopath. They gave him maple syrup. They're Canadians, so
So that makes sense. Yeah.
They gave him apple cider vinegar, horseradish, onion, garlic, and ginger root because sick children are quite similar to pasta. And yet for weeks, the child's condition did not improve.
Really?
Yeah, I know, it's hard to believe.
Stunning.
A nurse friend thought the boy likely had meningitis and suggested that perhaps the parents should take him to a real doctor for real medicine, possibly some sort of antibiotic, instead of just treating him with whatever they happened to find in their spice rack. Instead,
I laugh because I'm sad.
Yeah. Instead, they headed back to the naturopath. The child was so stiff, he couldn't sit in the car.
Oh, no. That is meningitis. That is meningitis.
Yeah. At some point, the naturopath prescribed a tincture of echinacea, which tastes horrible on pasta, but still is an actual medicine. Maybe they should have tried moldy bread. Eventually, Ezekiel stopped breathing, and his parents finally called an ambulance. But on March 13th, 2012, he died at the hospital after being removed from life support. And naturally, David Steffen knew exactly who was responsible for his son's death: the paramedics in the hospital and the healthcare system. Also, there was some sort of conspiracy about vaccines and forcing parents who don't vaccinate to subject their sick children to actually effective health care or something. I don't know. But despite the obvious culpability of big, free, effective healthcare system, David and Colette were convicted of failing to provide the necessaries of life to their child. David was sentenced to 4 months in jail, and Colette was sentenced to 3 months of house arrest, which actually seems pretty lenient for baby killing. David Steffen continues to fight his conviction. He remains out on bail until Canada's Supreme Court hears his case, or hears his appeal. Now, you might think that someone in David Steffen's position might find it difficult to be gainfully employed in healthcare adjacent industry. Even the alt-med
we've been at this too long.
Healthcare industry. Because you think that people might say, well, yeah, like big pharma, Tamarosol, autism, chemicals I can't pronounce. But you killed your baby. And yet, David Steffen's father, Anthony, is the founder of True Hope Nutritional Support. According to their mission statement, if you could bring up the slide, True Hope was established to set and define the global standard of what true healing means by designing and applying evidence-based products and professional quality programs accessible and tailored to the needs of men, women, and children, providing them the knowledge and education necessary for individual ownership of health. At True Hope, we commit to overcoming regulatory issues, educating.
I'm sorry, but
educating
spit at them.
Yeah, educating humankind on prevention and treatment of nutritional deficiency disorders, and establishing a new mainstream culture of non-invasive healing. By leading out with compassion, having trust in God, we will point every action toward the great pinnacle of hope.
Oh, good God, I want to kill these people.
Yeah, now you'll notice that this is accompanied...
I really do. I just want to kill these people. I want these people dead and gone.
Yeah, you'll notice that this is accompanied by a picture of a living child who is definitely not Ezekiel Steffen.
Yeah.
That's a stock photo.
Yeah, of a living child. In addition to the family business, and they talk about body and mind, but they do seem to focus a lot on mental health. And there's a background story, which is the father
Killed his
Anthony-
kid?
No, his father, Anthony Stephan, and his wife Debbie, I believe they're Latter-day Saints, had large family, 10 children. The mother, Debbie, was bipolar and eventually committed suicide. And 2 of the kids also were showing signs of bipolar. And they tried, I guess, real medicine, and things weren't working, so they went the crazy route. But you can sort of understand frustration and upset. But then they went crazy and made a lot of money out of it. But anyway, in addition to the family business, David Stephan has been touring. He calls it the Rise Up Tour. He's continued to appear as a representative of True Hope. In interviews, he has said his legal issues have no relevance to his job. Quote, "How does that reflect on me whatsoever, on my involvement in the natural health industry?"
Wow, he is as dense as a concrete elephant.
Yeah. What does my killing my child with maple syrup and garlic instead of medicine, what does that have to do
with me killing your child? With those
are 2 totally different children I'm killing.
Yeah. He says he has made 30 presentations in the past year without any major problems.
No one died during the presentation? Well, that's okay.
No. But occasionally, there is a snag. In February, he was removed as keynote speaker from a wellness expo after complaints from sponsors. Stephan blamed pharma trolls.
Pharma trolls.
Yeah.
That's a new term.
Yeah. And as of this morning, though, however, he was still scheduled to speak at the Body, Soul, and Spirit Expo, which never seems to have any commas in it whatsoever, which really bothers me. The Body, Soul, and Spirit Expo in Calgary later this month. Promoter Chandler Armstrong said, "We addressed that quite a while ago when that stuff about the wellness show came up. We don't see our role as part of the court system or judging. Our stance is, if David is found guilty by the courts, which he has been, by the way,
we don't have any judgment or taste or anything.
Or standards.
Or vetting.
Standards.
God almighty.
He also noted
curating
that at his event, they don't rely on sponsors. We're a self-sustaining event. It's up to the public to decide." Stephan was scheduled to discuss brain and thyroid health, a topic he is completely unqualified to discuss, as far as I'm aware. He said on Facebook that he would discuss, quote, "how to avoid dangerous psychiatric medications while achieving a far greater quality of life."
Like the quality of life that makes you want to kill yourself, right?
This will entail how over the past 70 years, the big chemical companies have compromised agriculture and the devastating effect it has on our foods and subsequently our health, said a man who avoided giving his son dangerous antibiotics, achieving a horrible quality of life and a very small quantity of life. But while the Body, Soul, and Spirit Expo may not have to worry about sponsors, it turns out it does have to reckon with the venue's operators, who earlier today tweeted the following. There's a slide.
Fuck these gits.
Gray Eagle Resort and Casino has expressed concern to the organizers of the Body, Soul, and Spirit Expo, an event held at our venue on April 27th and 29th. They have now released the following statement. Effective immediately, Body, Soul, and Spirit Expo has removed David Stephan from participating in the April 27th to 29th Expo. Body, Soul, and Spirit is now reviewing the exhibitor application process in order to maintain the integrity of all future shows.
Have you killed your child?
Yeah,
Yes or no?
recently. He's also been dropped from the May Expo in Saskatoon. And I'm just really happy I got the opportunity to say Saskatoon. The moral of the story is, if you are having some kind of health, wellness, or alt med expo, don't invite a guy who killed his own toddler by withholding medical treatment. Also, secondarily, don't kill your own toddler by withholding medical treatment.
In their defense, I don't think they invited him. It sounds like
they invited.
They have speakers, which are people who pay to be there to speak.
Yeah, there was something though about we've had True Hope before. They're one of our usual sponsors. Blah blah blah. But finally, onion and garlic are great in lasagna. They don't cure meningitis.
Clearly.
Jesus Christ.
Oh boy.
The cognitive dissonance that this guy either there's nothing like that. That's just amazing.
On the other hand, he does look a little like Jesus. I didn't include a picture of him, but long hair and beard.
The fact that he looks like Jesus doesn't enter into it, Eve.
And he acts like a martyr.
Oh, well, good point. Touche.
Yeah.
Self-appointed.
Oh.
All right. Well, I don't see any questions. Alex is wondering if you can pronounce Saskatchewan.
Saskatchewan?
Saskatchewan.
Because you said Saskatoon.
Saskatchewan. Yeah.
All right, so I'm going to do my topic. I'll try to keep this short. It's kind of a bit of a rant, and I'm not going to mention any names because I don't want to get into another fight with some blogger out there. But
Wikipedia Brown, for instance?
Yeah, no, Wikipedia Brown's very cool. Check her out on Twitter. But where do I start? You know, when we get into battles with woo-woos on Wikipedia, they constantly want to accuse skeptics of doing this or doing that. And inevitably, they make these accusations and they don't back it up with evidence. Or if they do back it up with evidence, it's the most glancingly related evidence. Like, oh, this guy said this in a comment. It's like, what did he edit? What did he change in the article that you didn't like? And what did you try to put in? And tell me how the rules. You can never pin them down on that. And it drives me crazy because everything on Wikipedia is recorded. Every single letter that's changed on Wikipedia is recorded. Who did it, when they did it, whether it was left in, who commented on it. It's all in there. Minus some stuff, because obviously they have to be aware of libel, slander, that kind of stuff, and the laws in different countries, because Wikipedia operates in a number of different countries. So, for instance, if you say something that could provoke a lawsuit from a living person, not only will your edit get removed, but sometimes even the comment that you made when you edit, because every time you make an edit, you can explain what you're doing so someone can understand. And sometimes you'll even see those removed because they don't want to get sued by people who are alive. And they have very strict rules about articles about living people. So the reason I got on all this is because somebody who ostensibly should be an ally of skeptics went off on a rant a few weeks back and basically said that skeptics are defending this horrible person on Wikipedia, and I have proof. And he did, and this guy is a blogger who's been around for a long time. He's on one of the major blogging platforms and has been there for years and should know better. Now, I know better. You know, my first thought in this rant was to say, why don't bloggers behave like journalists? But I don't want to open that can of worms. But I really wish bloggers, instead of trying to pick fights, rushing to hit post, would stop for a moment. And when you're making a post about a person, go ask that person about what you're accusing them, for crying out loud. Go email them. What this guy did was he accused Susan Gerbic and her guerrilla skeptics of guarding an article. And this is all about the Lawrence Krauss thing. And I don't want to get into the details about Lawrence Krauss and whether or not it's
I
true.
just want to know who you're talking about now.
Whatever. You can figure it out. It's not too hard. But, you know, there have been these allegations about Lawrence Krauss. There have been sort of some allegations about him have existed for years, but some big ones came out in February in a BuzzFeed article, right? Mm-hmm. And Lawrence Krauss is a living person who, as a matter of fact, has in fact sometimes threatened people with lawsuits over people saying things about him. So Wikipedia, quite following their own rules and to their own, you know, credit in terms of defending themselves, were very careful when that article came out. And they did not want to put those accusations in his bio until there was corroborating stuff. Okay. Mm-hmm. Now, this blogger went on for like several paragraphs about how BuzzFeed, you know, basically defending BuzzFeed. Okay. And it's not about BuzzFeed. It's about having multiple credible sources for disparaging information about a living person. And those are the rules. And the people on Wikipedia who were removing that stuff from following the freaking rules. They were following the rules. And guess what? This guy, or person, sorry, I gave you a clue there, blogged about this. The BuzzFeed article.
You said he before, so
yeah.
Yeah. The BuzzFeed article came out on February 22nd. Okay, mm-hmm. for a couple, admittedly, for a couple of weeks after that, none of the accusations about Lawrence Krauss appeared in his bio on Wikipedia, and in fact, people were trying to put them in and not following the rules on that, and people were removing them. And people were, in fact, removing even the talk page comments because you can get sued over that stuff, okay? And they were following the rules on Wikipedia. This guy blogged on March, accuses the guerrilla skeptics of doing it, and in the process of accusing it, links to a blog post by yet a different blogger who I will also not name. That blog post didn't, you know, seemingly, if you were just reading this article and not following the links, it would seem like that other blog post was the one that was accusing the guerrilla skeptics. It was not. If you read that blog post, it accused the guerrilla skeptics of doing some things that other blogger disagreed with, but it had nothing to do with what was going on with the Lawrence Krauss article. And in fact, at the bottom of it, explicitly disclaimed accusing them of guarding the article. And he goes on defending BuzzFeed, and this person was nominated for a Pulitzer Prize and blah, blah, blah. And he keeps saying guerrilla skeptics and guerrilla skeptics and guerrilla skeptics, and he's got no evidence that the guerrilla skeptics were involved, even though there's all this history. And, you know, people, you can figure out who the guerrilla skeptics are on Wikipedia. You can figure out who their usernames are, and you can look in the history and see. And guess what? Guess what I'm getting to. Lo and behold, none of Susan's editors were working on the Lawrence Krauss article. None of them were removing this stuff. They were other editors on Wikipedia, and this guy accused them of doing that. And then guess what happened?
It blew up on Facebook.
2 days later, 2 days after his blog post, a huge section on the accusations ended up in the Lawrence Krauss article and has been there ever since. And does he apologize to Susan and her people? Does he say, "Oh, I was wrong. I pulled the trigger a little early. It took them 2 weeks, but they got the stuff in there"? No. Like 3 weeks later, he finally says, "Oh yeah, I guess the dam has broken and the material is getting out there. It's in Wikipedia, and other people are coming out about." And you know, the entire process, Wikipedia was following the rules. They were waiting to have a second and third and fourth credible source, and they got those sources. And as soon as they got those sources, the material went into the article and it followed the rules of Wikipedia. For God's sakes, people, if you're going to blog about real people who are working on Wikipedia, check your facts. And if you're going to blog about Wikipedia, learn how the damn thing works, okay? It really makes me mad. And it makes me mad when woo-woos do this and accuse Susan and her people of doing things when they aren't even working on the articles in question. But for a blogger who ostensibly is part of the skeptic, science, atheist realm of blogging, to accuse a bunch of skeptics of doing this really chaps my whatever gets chapped.
I'm going to disagree with you about one thing, Tim.
What?
I don't think that picking up a phone and calling people or even emailing people is all that useful. I've done it myself. Let me finish, okay? I've done it myself, and many times, and it gets you nothing but a headache of an email exchange arguing about the issue. When you disagree with somebody,
I'm not saying. Let me finish. I'm not saying about disagreeing. I'm talking about reporting.
I understand that. I understand that, Tim. Let me finish what I'm saying. I don't think that picking up a phone and calling somebody is helpful. I do think that checking your facts is helpful. I don't. Yes. My point is that I don't think that that the person blogging, whatever I didn't read the blog. I don't know who you're talking about, but I'm going to go with what you're saying. Sounds to me like what you're saying is that I would say, I don't think they needed to pick up the phone and call Susan or even email Susan. I think they just needed to keep their mouth shut until they knew what they were talking about. Because if they're making the assumption that guerrilla skeptics are doing this simply because the stuff is disappearing or because it's not showing up, then that's an assumption. That's not good journalism. Yeah. It's not good. It's not good reporting. It's not nice. It's not right. But
it's also not scientific. He didn't consider
not scientific. There's nothing
any
good about
alternate theories for why that was happening. He didn't consider
if they don't understand how Wikipedia works,
alternate hypotheses.
If they don't understand how Wikipedia works, I don't know how they can complain about what's going on in it, especially in the discussion sections.
Right.
I just don't think that it's particularly helpful when you're going to criticize somebody to try to discuss it with them. When you're criticizing them about something that you know that is public, that is out there, that you can refer to, that actually happened, that you can refer to and you can cite.
What I'm talking about.
This person couldn't. It doesn't apply here because this person couldn't cite anything. You shouldn't be writing about it if you can't cite it, if you can't explain it, if you can't show it. You shouldn't be writing about it. Period.
It might make sense to possibly try to have contacted Susan to ask a factual question.
Sure.
That's the distinction. I agree with you. A lot of blogs, here's what I think on this issue, and this other person thinks something else, and here's why I think they're wrong. I agree with you on that type of stuff, opinion blogging.
Or even criticizing.
No point.
Even criticizing
There's no point calling the person ahead
even criticizing somebody for something that they said publicly or something that they did publicly. I don't see the point in calling them and picking up the phone and having a chat with them.
I'm not saying that. I'm talking about he made a basic statement of fact, and he never fact-checked that in the article.
Totally agree with you there.
He just assumed that this other blogger who was writing an opinion piece, and actually, if I remember correctly what is in the other blog piece, I would not say that other blogger has made a mistake, because most of what that other blogger was talking about was opinions about strategy in terms of, a lot of people criticize Susan and the guerrilla skeptics. People don't like the name. People don't like the fact that that they're too aggressive on Wikipedia, that they give the impression that they're doing things like this, even though they're not. And you can have those opinions. You can say that. And I would never say that you should go confront Susan and say, Susan, I think what you're doing is wrong, and I'm going to blog about it. You're
Well,
right. That's not productive.
When
I hear say, I think Susan and her people are doing this terrible thing, maybe I should fact check that before I accuse somebody of doing something terrible.
Totally agree with you.
Cite some other blogger.
I totally agree with you, but it really irks me when I hear people say, instead of fighting about it, why don't you just sit down and chat and have a beer together and chat?
I'm not saying
you know what I mean?
I'm not.
You've heard that before, Tim. You've heard that.
I have heard that, and I am not saying that. For God's sakes, have an opinion. Blog about the opinion. I don't even disagree with him blogging about this issue. He could have even blogged that he thought the Wikipedia policies were wrong. That were being used, but for God's sakes, get the basic facts of why that material was being. He made up this entire thing that skeptics were ganging up and pulling this material out simply because they were trying to defend Lawrence Krauss, and that was not what was happening. They were defending Wikipedia from libel lawsuits. And then he turns around and turns it into an accusation about a specific group of people that he had no facts to support. And I think if you're going to make factual claims in a blog post, you should fact check them. And that would have been a super easy thing to check with Susan or any of her other people. Just fling an email. You don't have to get on the phone. You don't have to have a big discussion. You could have just flung an email to one or more of them and said, hey guys, have you guys been working on Lawrence Krauss's article? Because it seems like there's some weird edit histories going on there.
Or
and
just
they would have told you, no, we're not working on that.
We're just not talked about it at all.
Well, he had other things in the blog post, and
there's also this ongoing war of this tribalism, in the skepto-atheist community.
Yeah, that's why I didn't want to get into naming who either one of these two bloggers were.
Wow. Okay, so I found who it was.
Don't name them.
I'm not going to name them. Susan has stepped in and has defended herself. Other people who I know and respect have asked the appropriate questions. What evidence do you have that someone in the group was involved in suppressing information? They seem to have torn up what you I think you ultimately have is somebody who is wedded to moral posturing. I mean,
right.
And
he had this image that people were defending Krauss, and things were not happening fast enough for him, that everybody wasn't immediately shouting witch and pointing at Lawrence Krauss, and it didn't happen fast enough. Things take time. And, sure enough, within a few days after his own blog post, and it wasn't because of his blog post, it was because these things take time. It takes time for news to follow. It takes time for multiple sources to develop. It takes time for people to do their own investigations or get investigations started. And, and it was just the dumbest blog post. I'm never going to pay any attention to what that guy says anymore. Not that
I didn't recognize his name.
You didn't recognize his name?
Not really.
No, he's not super well known unless you hang out on that particular blogging platform.
Oh, then I probably don't.
But the problem is there, like you said, there's the tribalism, Barbara, and there are certain other bloggers who read his blog, and those accusations got repeated on several other blog platforms.
Of course they did.
And the old story: a lie travels further before the truth has a chance to put on its shoes, or whatever. I just butchered.
That's pretty damn close. That's pretty damn close.
I hope a living writer didn't say that. You're going to hear about it.
Well, I'll hear from the quote investigator.
It's Mark Twain.
Yeah.
And so
it's an old sentiment that goes back.
It's really Mark Twain because.
What? Yeah.
I don't think it really is Mark Twain.
It's a sentiment that goes back at least to the Renaissance. I can think of a specific example of seeing. It was a tongue flying in the air in a commonplace book from the Renaissance, and the idea was that words they get out and they fly away, you know, and
Oh yeah,
it's a
That's
mnemonic
the
device.
framing
Yeah.
is putting it on your shoes, I believe. They're putting on its shoes, I believe, is a Mark Twain-ism.
Yeah. Well, you know what Abe Lincoln said about misquotes on the internet.
yeah.
Oh, and I looked at the other blogger who you're talking about who had a criticism of, and it has
Right.
nothing to do with it. Yeah,
it was amazing. You literally click through a link that says Guerrilla Skeptics. You click through it, you read the other blog posts, and there's some criticism of Susan and her people, and perhaps legit. I don't know. I didn't want to get into that, but nothing about Krauss. Nothing.
You know, I have kind of peeled away from. So let's say that there are several different areas of where religion is not a big thing. Skepticism, humanism, atheism. I have kind of walked away from the whole atheist area. I don't know if that's too much, but I've walked away from all that because it has become kind of a shit show.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I'm not, and like, back in the day, I was totally for shit show.
Yeah, no, it's always been that way to me. It's always seemed that way to me.
Yeah.
It's all about hating religious people and so forth, and it's never really been my cup of tea.
I don't think,
and not because I think that, not because I give religion a pass, or because I don't think that it's an important thing to educate people about, but this idea that we're supposed to be helping people by pissing on them, just I don't get that. You don't help people by calling them stupid and you know,
right.
I just don't get that. So
Yeah.
Twain didn't say that, by the way.
No? Who said it?
It's very complicated.
Now go to the quote investigator. He always
that's exactly where I am.
Yeah.
I'm wondering where I learned that it was Twain.
Oh, it's one of those things that it's been attributed to Twain and a bunch of other people.
Because he's clever.
Yeah, but and like Winston Churchill, but he doesn't seem to have said it.
Yeah, he
Twain,
was.
Swift, Franklin.
Guy was very nice to me when I did my article about brains fallout.
Mm.
I quoted his article and then took what he had, most of the research he had done, and then took it one further step and found another piece that he hadn't found. And he was very nice to me, very gracious, and I was.
This is great. Sorry, I had to look it up. It says a version of this adage was attributed to Mark Twain in 1919, but Twain died in 1910.
Yeah.
I love that.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently, he's the one that's most attributed
It's
to.
fitting that the very quote would be.
Oh God,
misattributed.
there was one. I had a student several years ago in a paper. Started off, Thomas Jefferson said blah blah blah, and he was talking about like central banking, and I was like, okay, that central banks control the money by inflation and deflation, and the OED didn't have examples of those words being used to apply to banking for like 60 and 100 some odd years after his death.
Let me guess, he got this off of out of a David Barton book.
There's something like that, right? Yeah, it's like that level of fact checking.
Yeah.
Was it David Barton? No.
Wasn't that the Christian?
He would the
America's a Christian nation history guy.
Yeah, that guy.
The guy, such a bad researcher that his book on Jefferson was recalled by his own publisher, who was a Christian publisher.
Yeah, that's pretty sad.
They even disavowed his stuff. All right, I think we're basically.
I think we had a breakthrough today, Tim.
Yeah. Yelling and screaming.
Catharsis.
Yeah, I was gonna say I think Tim got some aggression out.
It's been a while.
Too bad that venting doesn't actually do anything, but maybe it helped other people.
It was amusing. Eve was a little scared.
All right,
I texted Bob, Mommy and Daddy are fighting.
I'm scared, is what she said to me.
I've seen Tim much madder. So.
Oh yeah.
No, this is totally worth being extremely annoyed about. It doesn't make anyone look good.
Yeah.
Nope.
At all.
It doesn't help anybody. And it just what I find just absolutely simultaneously amusing and frustrating as hell about it is the whole point, the whole core, if you could boil skepticism and atheism down to its barest bones, it is about truth.
Right.
It is about educating about what the truth is and how we know it or how to discover it. And so when you do something so careless, which is my biggest complaint about all skeptical efforts and stuff, is that they're often careless. When you do something that careless, it's just sad. It's sad because that is the core of your mission is to fight against that sort of thing.
Yeah. Yep.
So,
all right. We have any announcements or anything like that? No.
My students are having a pseudoscience fair coming up.
Cool.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. I got the idea from Caleb Black.
Did none of the exhibits work correctly?
No, they have to be educational, and I encourage them to check out What's the Harm in order to connect with the public. Like, why is this weird ass topic important?
Right.
So you're gonna get shouts out.
Oh, okay.
So.
But right. Yeah. Are we doing books? Does anybody have a book?
Oh, I don't have a book.
I got a book.
I gotta find a book.
Bob, go.
Other than the story of Anne Hutchinson, however, the simplistic, monstrous birth scenario for the origin of the Jersey Devil has little supporting evidence. A review of the extant publications and doctor's records from the period show no references to such births in the Pine Barrens region. What remains is not Mother Leeds, but the colonial-era family patriarch Daniel Leeds.
Eve, you ready?
Yep. Back at your house, you look over the fence into your next-door neighbor's garden. Would he mind if you dug a trench there? You bet he would. He's away at the moment on a 3-month management training course in Arboeth. But you're loath to sink even the smallest test bit into his lawn because he's a dull, humorless individual who's never shown the slightest interest in anything cultural or historical. Fortunately, there's Mrs. Gator. She's a very different kettle of fish. With luck, you'll be able to talk her into it, sacrificing a small corner of her unkempt vegetable patch for you to explore.
Wow. Barb?
We Americans are growing increasingly disenchanted with the institutions on which we depend. We can't trust them. They disappoint us. They fail to give us what we need. This is true of schools that are not serving our kids as well as we think they should. It is true of doctors who seem too busy to give us attention and unhurried care we crave. It's true of banks that mismanage our assets, of bond rating agencies that fail to provide an accurate assessment of the risk of possible investments. It's true of a legal system that seems more interested in expedience than in justice. It's true of a workplace in which we fill quotas and hit targets and management systems, but end up feeling disconnected from the animated forces that drew us to our careers in the first place.
All right. Let's see what I got here. Game theory, one of the most useful branches of modern mathematics, was anticipated in the early 1920s by the French mathematician Émile Borel. But it was not until 1926 that John von Neumann gave his proof of the minimax theorem, the fundamental theorem of game theory. On this cornerstone, he built almost single-handedly the beautiful basic structure of game theory. His classic 1944 work, Theory of Games and Economic Behavior, written with the economist Oscar Morgenstern, created a tremendous stir in economic circles. Since then, game theory has developed into a fantastic amalgam of algebra, geometry, set theory, and topology with application to competitive situations in business, warfare, and politics, as well as economics.
Why didn't they include psychology in there?
Well, I don't know. I might have accidentally skipped it. I was kind of skipping over a footnote in the middle of that. But Bob, what was yours?
Mine was Brian Regal and Frank Esposito's The Secret History of the Jersey Devil.
Ooh.
How Quakers, hucksters, and Benjamin Franklin created a monster. And it's not the United States.
Eve?
Archaeology is Rubbish by now Sir Tony Robinson
Ooh, them's fighting words.
and the late Professor McAston.
It's also literally true.
It's
It is
about
the discovery of things that have been left behind.
That is
True.
a great, great title for a book.
That is. That is.
and everyone should watch Time Team. By the way,
Yes.
Time Team?
yes,
What's that on?
it's where the books basically comes from. It's an archaeology, a British archaeology show.
Huh, okay.
Yeah. It went on for like 20 years. It's amazing.
Huh. Okay. Mine is, you probably can't read that there. Practical Wisdom by The Right Way to Do the Right Thing by Sharp and Schwartz. Schwartz and Sharp.
Yep. And I repeat it again. Mathematical Magic Show by Martin Gardner. That was the one I picked up for $1 at an estate sale in the neighborhood.
Oh, nice.
All right. Well, I think we're done. Another one in the can, as they say. Do they
Who's
say
they?
that? I don't know.
Mark
Yeah.
Twain.
Mark Twain.
It's Mark Twain. Go fact check that.
That was good, Eve. That was fast.
By the way, chat on the YouTube side, but the shooting Bob was talking about was a real shooting. It happened on August 24th, 2012, right in front of the Empire State Building. A guy was waving a gun around. 2 cops came up and shot at him and ended up hitting 9 bystanders.
Jesus.
And the guy.
Not a mass shooting, though.
Yeah. Friendly fire incident, I guess is what you'd call it.
Friendly fire isn't.
All right. All right. The Virtual Skeptics is an independent production of What's the Harm.net, Skeptical Humanities, Brian Gregory, ICBS Everywhere, and Doubtful News. Our logo was designed by Sarah Mayhew at sarahmayhew.com. Our theme music is by Musicant and is used with permission.